Hello and welcome to StratNews Global. I'm Parul, Chandra, and with me is Mr. Sujeev Shakya. He is the chair of the Nepal Economic Forum, and he's recently written a book called Unleashing the Vajra. Welcome to StratNews Global, Sujeev.
Thank you.
The book does, it talks about India, Nepal in a historical context. But what would you like to say about the current state of India-Nepal ties?
I think India-Nepal ties after the 2015 blockade has been a big challenge. It has not recovered since then. We need to understand that an entire generation got alienated. From that perspective, it is at a stage where geopolitics and a lot of other complications have come in. And things have been challenging. But at the same time, I look at it positively, say that there is an open moment to really recalibrate this, to say that what went wrong in the past and how do we move this forward.
Have things moved forward since 2015? Things, as in bilateral relations, are now on an even keel. But even so, we frequently hear mention of the blockade in a negative context, and the fact that it's something that really created a huge divide between the Indian and the Nepalese polity.
Yes, and I think in that context, what is important to understand is that 50% of Nepalis are under 25 and 70% are under 30. So that young people have been very disenchanted. For a lot of people like us who have historic relationship with India, we studied here, we come here for different purposes, be it pilgrimage or medical or tourism. For us, how we look at India is different. But the newer generation is exposed to many more countries. They are traveling around the world. They are going for education. They are going for tourism. They are going for work. And so it's a new Nepal we are dealing with, and perhaps that has not really sunk in Delhi per se. Efforts have been made. For instance, there was the eminent person group was formed to see how this would be recalibrated. A report has been submitted. We don't know what is the fate of the report. While there has been G to G some efforts, but we don't see substantiative enough that would bring it to a stage where when Prime Minister Modi visited in 2014, that's the time when we saw there is a recalibration, a new era of relationship. I don't think it has come back to that.
You just mentioned this eminent persons group report, and there is still some amount of uncertainty if the report has even been submitted, and if it's been submitted, whether any action is being taken on the report. Do you think things like these act as irritants in bilateral relations?
Yes. I think it would be good to see that what is the fate of it, whether it is accepted or not. It should be made more transparent. It's not necessary that every report that is submitted has to be accepted. It also needs to look at what are the acceptable stuff and what are not acceptable. And I think the more transparency in this process would bring about more trust. Because the fact that it is kept in an opaque manner does raise questions into the intent. And I think in Nepal, this is capitalized a lot in terms of, sort of politically to, build their own agenda for the political parties.
Yes, also because I think the report looked at the India-Nepal Friendship Treaty, and Kathmandu has been seeking a review or a revision of this treaty.
I don't think it's seeking review, because the biggest challenge, I think, in Nepal, in India, I would say, is that this treaty has always been seen as something that is beneficial to Nepalis, and it's a concession that India is providing. But on the ground, we see more Indians benefit from this treaty than Nepalis do, in terms of movement, in terms of doing business, in terms of, the opportunities they can garner. Especially, we have to look from the perspective of the border. So that's where I see is a fundamental flaw. And also, Kathmandu talking to Delhi is not going to resolve. I've been continuously talking about how we get more of these states in India and the provinces in Nepal to talk about this and find a solution that is mutually acceptable. And today you have technology in terms of if you want to manage security. I've been a big proponent of having sort of controlled movement in the sense not of restricted movement, but regulated movement in the sense that people carry security, documents, or they have ID cards, so that we know that, at each country that we don't have security threats because of this open porous border. So these are things that we have to look at from a more pragmatic perspective. And if we do that, then it would benefit everybody. And also, we don't have to go to Europe to learn something. We have seen how ASEAN is operating. We have seen how East Africa community has been operating. We've been working in these countries. And we see how these transformations have taken place in the past decade and a half, especially with the usage of technology. And I think that's what we can look at. And again, provide solutions and use a solution-oriented approach rather than a problem-oriented approach.
Taking you back to the blockade, was it something that pushed Prime Minister Oli further into Chinese arms?
Yes, I wouldn't say Chinese arm. What happened was that Nepal was left no option but to explore more. And I think, Nepal, rather than being India landlocked, I always say it was India locked. Now today with China, it has opened up. And coincidentally, or the BRI also started at the same time. So the opening up with China is different than in the 60s, because China itself is moving with a very ambitious connectivity program of theirs. Yes. And Nepal is part of it, for them, because it's across multiple countries that they are looking at connectivity projects and to enhance their own investment, business, trade interests.
But how practical is China's connectivity endeavors? You are building a railway line across the Tibetan plateau. Is that possible? Or promising Nepal access to its ports? The ports are several thousand kilometers away, whereas the Calcutta port is far closer for Nepal.
But if you look at, everybody looks at facilitation. Today, despite the distance, you find a lot of importers. If you're importing from China, you'd rather get it overland, and they find it easier because you don't know the cost structures on the other side of the border. It's very opaque. You don't know how much of subsidy is there on transportation. It's a different system they follow. So a lot of people, when I talk to freight forwarders, they're moving a lot of goods over land. They feel that that's much more cost effective. They don't have the challenge of being stuck in Kolkata port. So this is a new mindset that people have. And when it is, again, everything is got to do with narratives, mindsets, and perceptions. The perception is that, as I was talking earlier in the program, is that the perception is that China is always helpful. That is the perceptions Nepalis have. Now it's very difficult to, change that. And if you look at on the ground, they follow up with very good soft power initiatives.
Oh yes, now they have they're teaching Mandarin,
and then they're taking a lot of people are going to China to study. Yes. And so if somebody who has seen Guangzhou, have seen Shanghai, who've seen the glittering parts of China, when they start comparing, naturally they start having opinions about China, and so that you cannot stop. And again, this is a generation that is on TikTok. They're seeing the same things that is coming anywhere in the world. They're seeing a lot of materials online, and then suddenly they realize that, oh, this is not bad.
So India is lost ground to China.
I wouldn't say it has lost ground, because culturally, again, our relationship between India and China Nepal and India is very historical. If you look at in terms of from a religion perspective, culture perspective, social perspective, there's a lot of strong ties. But then if you don't get your politics right, it cannot go too far. We have seen between India and Pakistan, there's so much of commonality, but then there is so much of, political and ideological differences. So, and so that is where the challenge lies. But also we should learn from countries like Bangladesh that uses, for instance, Chinese money, but then gets Japanese contractor to execute projects, or would get Japanese money and would get Chinese contractor to execute. So Bangladesh, over the period of time, has learned how to manage this, and they have been working very well with India, working well with China, and that's why they are one of the fastest growing economies in South Asia. So there is these lessons also we can learn.
What can India do to somehow retain lost ground? Also, there has also been this frequent criticism of India being unable to deliver on infrastructure projects on time, whereas the Chinese are pushing ahead with the BRI.
I would say that I'm not sure about the speed of projects and all. For me is secondary. But what India definitely should do is that get more young people on both sides to engage with each other. Sort of these Nepal-India relationship has been hijacked by retiree clubs. All the retired folks on both sides sit in and discuss the same thing they've been discussing for 30 years. Mm-hmm. Now we need younger people to look at how do you look at Nepal and India relations in 2040? What can we do? Maybe bring in 30 students from each, sort of side and start a bit of exchange program, do more events, more, and let them appreciate that how close we are. Yes. And that is going to be more sustainable. Then your, sort of all the other elements of projects and investments and trade and business, I personally think would be taken care of. Because at the youth level, which is happening in the border towns, we need to encourage that. For instance, there are cricket players from, India who are in clubs in Nepal who are playing cricket. These lot of these, IPL style tournaments that are coming in. So let's encourage that. There are, sort of people who from Nepal who come into reality shows in India. And so let's start at that level and let's push a lot of this. And if the foundation is strong, then the building is going to be strong. If we start working from the top with a very weak foundation, like in 2015, it will, sort of fall apart.
But why has all this happened? Why are more Nepalese students choosing to study in Australia rather than in India?
So
whereas it would be much cheaper to study in India.
But then if you look at from a standpoint, if you are doing a degree in Australia and you get an opportunity to work there, because let's not forget that people are not going to study, they are going you're getting visas, you're going to migrate. So that's the opportunity people see. So if they see those opportunities, they would go there. And it's not that people are not coming to India, but then there are, preferential arrangements that people see in going to other countries.
One question that has also come to my mind is how is Nepal going to balance its ties with China versus India? I mean, China is here to stay. So
I think Nepal would have to, like in the 16th and 17th century, is not about selling goods, products, and manufacturing, sort of clothing or something. In the new age of technology, of AI, machine learning, where does Nepal stand in linking between India and China? That's what it needs to see. If you look at airspace, Nepal could be an ideal, conduit between flights flying between, India and China, which is increasing at phenomenal level. I mean, let's not forget that India, our Indian Prime Minister and Chinese President have met, 17 times in the past 5 years. So the relationship between the two countries is unprecedented, and it is looking for more trade, more business, more investment. And we see more Chinese companies in India, we see more Indian companies in China. So Nepal in the middle should benefit, maybe not the traditional way, but then in the new way.
And final question, how is India's neighborhood first policy perceived in Nepal?
I think with India, the perception is a lot of talk and no action. And that earlier, before the BRI days, everybody, sort of took it. But now post-BRI, the way you see China following action, to back their words, there is serious, sort of rethinking that is required. On paper, I feel what the intent of India, be it on neighborhood first or the things I love about the Act East policy, so those are great on paper, BBIN. But what is the BIMSTEC? But what is it doing on the ground to really push this? And that's a big point for introspection, I would say. And as I said, it's like every one of us in South Asia continues to get busy of looking at what the other person is not doing. But I think we have to reflect upon to say that what are we not doing and do those things.
On that note, thank you so much for talking to StratNews Global.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.